Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Amanda Brugel, an actor whose credits include recurring roles on Kim's Convenience, The Handmaid's Tale, Pretty Hard Cases, Workin Moms, Dare Me, Snowpiercer, and Orphan Black. She also makes movies when she has the time, appearing in Sugar Daddy, Suicide Squad, and Room, among others. With her latest feature, the twisty domestic drama Ashgrove, Amanda shares writing and producing credits with co-star Jonas Chernick and director Jeremy Lalonde. She also plays the lead, a brilliant scientist whose work on solving a devastating global crisis is somehow tied to the stability of her own marriage. It's a departure for all concerned, and it's pretty good. You can find it in theaters and on digital across Canada this Friday, December 2nd. Amanda picked The Shawshank Redemption, Frank Darabont's 1994 adaptation of Stephen King's novella Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption, starring Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins as two convicts staring down life sentences in a state penitentiary known for its brutality. Initially regarded as a box office disappointment, Darabont's film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. And while it didn't win any of them, it became a home video champion and a cable TV perennial. It's now considered one of the most beloved films of that decade, a movie people hold close to their hearts and even wear on their skin. Really. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I've assumed that because you've done so many of these that you would have had at least 50 people suggest it, because in my mind, it's the greatest movie ever made. And I feel like it's such a basic bitch answer. Because it's just on everyone's list and it's always on top 100 lists and it's just such a beloved movie. And I first saw it when it first came out on VHS, and I was at a sleepover, and we ran out of movies, and so a parent's friend who was a teacher told us to watch it, and I think I was 15, and there's no way like 6 15-year-old girls at a sleepover are like, let's dig into this 3-hour just absolute story about redemption and horror and friendship and loss but we loved it. And I was curled up in my sleeping bag and I cried so hard at the end. And it was just as I was getting into acting, and I fell in love with the sounds of Morgan Freeman's voice and the honesty in the performances. I love Stephen King already. And just the overarching theme of hope. To me, it's the thing that's the most important message from it. And so I have "I hope" tattooed on my back.
Oh, that's lovely. You had mentioned there was a tattoo, and I was just hoping it wasn't "Get Busy Living" or "Get Busy Dying," because that just seems grim.
No, that's a bit far. Like there's so many lines from the movie. That's all it takes is pressure and time, when he's talking about the study of geology. Mm-hmm. There are so many very specific lines that I use, and friends that know how much I love the movie will say it to one another and have done so for over 20 years.
That's wonderful to have built up that level of connection to a movie. I mean, I have it with some stuff. Shawshank occupies such a strange space. I mean, not only for the 15-year-old girl aspect of it, but it's weird. You know, when it was named the number 1 film on the IMDb or something years and years ago, it was seen as such a shock to the critical community because it wasn't the most embraced film, and it was a bomb. Like, it didn't do well theatrically, which everybody forgets. It was kind of written off as the naive, open-hearted, like Stephen King wrote this. Everything about it was a weird negative at the time. I mean, I remember watching it and liking it because I was very familiar with the short story, having read that like 10 years earlier, I guess. And I really liked what Darabont did with it. The casting of Morgan Freeman, which
casting of him is Red.
And throwing it away, like just leaving it on Freeman's that one line. It's like, maybe because I'm Irish, and just throwing it out. Yeah. Whereas in the book in the novella, he was, I think, I can't remember who King said he would have picked, but it was a really strange choice, even in 1984. Like, it was sort of a cartoon Irish character. And Freeman just doesn't do anything differently. Like, he plays the role with that thing he does where he just inhabits the character as himself and then suddenly becomes a different person.
Well, that's why Darabont cast him. He loved his voice. He loved his strength. He loved the cadence of his voice. And with Red narrating, majority of the film, that's the huge thing that they leaned on, knowing that he was going to do that.
Yeah. Oh, and it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
It's not the first time he played a kind of a wise mentor, but it's the first time he seems to own it as the Morgan Freeman role. Like he's come into it. Like Robin Hood was 3-4 years earlier, and he was
Driving Miss Daisy.
89. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But he's still ultimately kind of subservient in that part. He's playing a version of a subservient character, and the authority that he brings to Red, and the weariness, right? Like he's not getting out, and he doesn't have any illusions. He's no longer hopeful, and so Andy arrives and changes everything.
His whole skipping to the end, his whole monologue, if you remember that scene about becoming institutionalized. And then throughout, as you see the little sort of vignettes of him going up for the parole meetings with all of the people throughout all of the different years, I suppose, in my mind, it's every 9 years. They've been there for 20 years. Yeah. And that last... The last meeting he has with the parole board, when he just completely gives up and says, "So stamp your damn form, Sonny, and stop wasting my time." It's the fatigue in his voice that he uses, and Morgan Freeman doesn't really do that. He doesn't really play dark, or he's not even really dark. He doesn't play tired.
Yeah,
I find in a lot of roles, and he was very settled into this role from the beginning. It was quite a lovely turn for him, because I was familiar with him before, knowing I wanted to be an actor, and at the time not having access to a ton of Black male or female actors. And so seeing him in this, it was like seeing an uncle, like a familiar face.
Yeah, and he is. I mean, despite the fact that Red is, I mean, as he says, not a good person early on. Like he lays that out on the line pretty quickly as well.
The only guilty man in Shawshank.
Yeah, which again, I think is why he carries himself with that authority, because he's not pretending. He's occupying a moral space that no one else is occupying. And that gives him freedom and honesty. And the honesty in the end is that's the thing he's hiding from the parole board, right? Like until the last time, he is still, that's the time he pretends to be someone else.
Yes.
And it doesn't work for him. And he's not evil, but he's done bad things. And when his arc of slowly realizing that Andy Dufresne is an innocent is never articulated. It's just played on his face the whole time. And that gives him so much presence and so much watchfulness and alertness. Like Morgan Freeman is an incredible scene partner, but to watch, like revisiting the film and realizing how much he's doing without even interacting with anyone.
Or having the I say this a lot because in Handmaids I have to do the same thing, where he doesn't have to have any text to rely on to tell that story for himself. Usually a lot of actors have that sort of space for exposition in order to tell the audience what they're feeling, instead of having to emotionally show it, instead of having to emote. And some people, when you do have to emote, there's a lot of indicating going on, and there's actors have different tricks and things that they can do to try to show an audience what they're feeling, and he never does. He rides that line, which is quite beautiful in this. And Tim Robbins does it as well, though, which I think that why there are lovely scene partners together, because they both aren't indicating whatsoever. They're existing in the scene together so well without ever. Tim Robbins never plays the "woe is me, I'm the most innocent in the world," because he does bring up the fact that he didn't kill his wife, but he wasn't a great husband, he wasn't an attentive partner, and just because his character Andy is already still so sort of mild and reserved, and there's a wall there. They both have these it's just such beautiful nuanced performances that I don't think I'd paid attention to before, and maybe because it was 3 hours long and I was trapped in a sleeping bag, I did. But that was the first time I really recognized just the beautiful things that actors can do and what they can make people feel. It was the first time.
I can only imagine what that's like, getting hit by. I mean, were you familiar with Tim Robbins? Because he really wasn't.
No, Not at all. I had no idea who Tim Robbins was. But no, not at all. Any of them. And then afterwards, I was fans of everyone. I got to work with Gil Bellows, and I couldn't speak to him for the first 2 weeks. It was about 4 years ago. We're friends now, but I could not speak to him. But no, not familiar with Tim Robbins at all. And like I said, it's not the subject matter of the movie is not something that should be appealing for 15-year-olds. But it was always very melodramatic and still am. And so the music, the score is stunning. And so that lulls you in immediately. And like I said, I was aware that it was Stephen King's, apart from his novella, because we had been doing a project before that in school on Stand By Me. Okay. And I didn't realize that was Stephen King as well.
Yeah, which was the first time in pop culture, I think, that people really understood that he wasn't just the horror guy. And
yes.
That was the Rob Reiner film really did it more than anything else.
Yeah.
But every story in different seasons, well, there's only 4, but they're just realist dramas. They're not fantastical in any way.
No.
And then the 4th one is The Breathing Method, which no one has ever filmed because it's just too weird, and I get that. I don't think there is a way to do that.
Me too.
I guess Apt Pupil has horror elements. I always forget that's in the book. But
yes,
and the film version of that takes it even further. But the tenderness in Shawshank as a short story too, or as a novella. I keep saying short story. The thing is like 200 pages long.
I know.
But the attention to detail, the tenderness, and the regard for hope and life and charity and all those things that horror authors aren't supposed to engage with. Mm-hmm. It highlights King's strengths and the things that have developed since, I think, as a writer, because I've been fascinated to watch him sort of turn into the 20th century. He's playing in Edgar Allan Poe's territory where there's a great deal of Gothic, but it's all situated in the here and now and in human relationships. And Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption is such a strange story, even for that, because it's all these ideas jumping around in his head that he hasn't figured out how to articulate. And then it flows into this all at once. And then you watch Darabont leave out the stuff that didn't work, which is remarkable.
Yes. Yeah. I was in preparing for this, and well, not preparing for it because I could talk about Shawshank all day, but I just wanted to look up just facts about the script. I didn't realize that he sold Darabont the rights for $5,000.
Yeah. He had made a short film previously, an adaptation of The Woman in the Room from Night Shift. And I think that was one of those dollar sales that King was doing at the time, where he would just, if a short filmmaker reached out to him and had a good pitch, he'd say, here you go. Which, again, Stephen King just keeps striking me as a fundamentally decent human being who just happens to, like, it's the David Lynch thing, it's the Cronenberg thing. Totally. He gets it all out.
Yes.
So
the demons aren't really, there's nothing to hide.
He can just be a nice person because all the monsters are between the covers of his books. And so his relationship with Darabont goes back to, like, I want to say the early 80s. Yeah. I mean, I must have read about The Woman in the Room in Fangoria way back when I was a kid. And Darabont launches his career with that, and he wrote the remake of The Blob, which I dearly love. Which
yes, so do I.
The third pillar of the great 80s remakes, the Thing, The Fly, and The Blob. And then he just goes off and does not that. He just decides not to make a horror movie for his big splashy debut.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Didn't he take a massive pay cut in order to be able to direct it?
Yes, I think so. Like he was already fairly well established as a screenwriter.
Yes.
And this is the thing that I still don't fully understand. I always forget about this, like I've blocked it out of my mind, but the original casting, you know about this? He wanted Tom Cruise to play Andy and Harrison Ford as Red.
I know. Well, Kevin Costner was kicking around for a while, which, no. I mean, Kevin Costner is great. Robin Hood is another, like, old school love of mine. I wouldn't put it on my list as one of my faves. I could quote the heck out of it.
Just the right age when you saw it?
Just the right age. Also, I mean, it was just the music and the soundtrack went wild in the early 90s. And it was just, I loved it. I worked at the movie theaters. I grew up in movie theaters. And so I worked at the theaters at the time when it came out. And so,
Oh, that's so cool. My grandfather owned a movie theater when I was a kid. So,
Really? Well, my father was one of the very first vice presidents of Famous Players, like the theater chain, and he built up megaplexes in all of the provinces. Like as we moved west, building like overseeing the foundation of the megaplexes that were being built in the 80s, we would move to each province, and so I grew up in projection booths.
that's amazing. The smell of Flavacol is still my Proustian Madeline.
Yes.
That horrible, oily, salty smell that I
Yes.
love and no one else does.
Yeah, and no one else really knows,
It's
really,
true.
that I know.
Yeah. And you're the only other person I know who uses the word megaplex.
Really?
Yeah, I think
Oh, yeah.
it's like an inside industry term that
I
was
think it
used.
is. I think, and it's also 80s, and it was like the idea of some of them being built, like the one in Calgary, was unheard of. Like at the time, having a theater chain, come in, yes, but having a theater with multi different, just different screens in every room, but also having sort of at the time it seemed like an over the top snack bar and a meeting area and a kid lounge. And so,
Right.
yeah, it seemed like little mini cities that were unheard of at the time. It was very exciting for the city.
And it persists. We still have a few of them.
We do.
They're scary now.
Well, it's strange. It feels like you're going back in time, or I'm stepping into Stranger Things. Every time I see one, or I see one in a film, yeah, it's odd.
Yeah, I was going to say it feels like walking into an arcade.
Yes, totally.
Even now. And going to see a movie like The Shawshank Redemption would feel weird because it's completely antithetical to a blockbuster, right? Like
Absolutely.
it has become this thing, but at the time it was this tiny little art movie that nobody saw. And then it became the most rented film, which is still something that's absolutely fascinating to me. But that's what video did, right? Like, especially now when you look back at the kind of movies that were huge successes on video, like Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction, those were always going to be a big deal. They were both massive cultural things. And Shawshank was waiting to be discovered and then just started rolling and never really stopped.
Never really stopped. But that being said, I don't know if had I discovered it in my even early 20s and someone said, hey, you should watch this, it's great, or even when I was late 20s, early 30s, when it really started to become this nostalgic piece of just part of the film zeitgeist that we all just love and hold on to. I think I probably would have watched it once, thought it was great. I don't know necessarily if I would have had lines tattooed on my body. I don't know if I would have the same relationship with it. I don't know if I would be able to quote it from beginning to end. It was just something about being 15 years old, seeing it really before anyone was talking about it. It was because my friend's dad was a teacher. He had a copy from the library. And it was just, and then we didn't really talk about it again. No one had ever brought it up. I would talk about it a lot and no one really knew it. So because it was so much part of my childhood, like my teenage years, I think that's the impact that it had on me. Like I said, being an adult, I would have loved it, but I don't think it would have filled my DNA like it has now.
Yeah. And I wonder if maybe it's because it's so earnest. So it's almost it is old fashioned in its storytelling structure, but its honesty and its emotional breadth. The fact that he pulls off the scene of everyone standing still listening to opera, which just shouldn't work.
No. In a prison? Like, no. No. There are some such ridiculous things. Even on top when they're mopping with the suds and he exchanges the tax information or says he's going to look over his tax information for his 2 bottles apiece for his, I think he calls them, what does he call them? Colleagues, companions, when they're tarring the roof. It's just so cheesy and so over the top. But you're right, there is a certain amount of there's an earnest, beautiful innocence in it with grown convicts that shouldn't work, but that's why I love it so much. I also think I love it because you see a different side of these people who have sort of been relegated to the sides, outcasts. We don't really consider people that are unseen, that are in prisons or have done foul things, as we don't think of them as having hearts or families or brotherhoods that are of substance. They usually have those sort of brotherhoods in order to survive, or maybe for other physical needs. But it was just such a beautiful story of just brotherhood and family that just took place in an unlikely setting.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to tell you about the latest Shiny Things newsletter, my twice-weekly dispatch about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming thing. Last week, I reviewed Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans and dug into new 4K releases of Malcolm X, Saturday Night Fever, Wayne's World, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find the link at the Semcast Twitter account. Did you miss me writing about movies? I did. Come check it out. And I think, again, Freeman's narration is the thing that, it's constantly showing us things that are outlandish or outsized, or, like Bob Gunton being so preposterously evil as the warden. And then Clancy Brown as the captain of the guard, who's
he's so ridiculous.
Yeah, he is. They're so over the top, but because Red's narration is so grounded and so almost sort of self-aware.
Yes.
I mean, he hangs the lantern on the opera sequence by laying it right out and saying, "Oh, look at these these monsters who are standing there bewitched," or however he puts it, and it makes it tender in a way that all the it's not cartoonish obstruction, but all the the way that these men represent the institution, just embodying the cruelty of it, and then double down on that with Andy while Red just sort of watches. That lets us see it as a story, a fable, maybe an allegory that's happening. I know that there's a lot of theory about Andy being a Christ figure, which I don't think is necessarily true.
I agree with you. I don't love that.
Yeah, I think the Christian stuff gets way more obvious in the Green Mile, where Darabont is clearly working something through.
Clearly. And for me, the Green Mile, that goes a little too far. To me, the Green Mile, and maybe because I did see it later on in life and I didn't see it in a sleeping bag at 15, that was a little too fairy tale elements. There was a little too much innocence. It was a little too soft. And I don't mean soft in a masculine or feminine way. I just mean in storyline, in writing, in performances. It was all just a bit week to be set in a prison. And so and I was really looking forward to it. I was really excited about it. And so that was a bit of a disappointment, because I think I had Shawshank in the back of my head, and I knew I wasn't going to see Shawshank 2, but I was hoping to see something along those lines where there was beautiful writing and equally gorgeous performances with the tenderness of some of the relationships. And there was, but I feel like it went a step too far.
Yeah. I mean, and I can see Darabont convincing himself that because he'd made Shawshank, he's the guy to do another Stephen King prison thing. But the story that it's telling is just, I don't know that you could make a successful feature out of it. Someone will probably, now that I've said that, someone will probably do an 8-part Hulu series, and we'll all have to watch it.
I could see that as a series, maybe. But then you could go into other characters. It's just, who knows?
It goes places that I don't think it was really ready to go.
Neither do I.
On the page, even I remember reading the chapbooks as they were released month to month and thinking, where is this even going? And then when it gets there, it's like, oh, okay, you thought that would go.
Yes. Yeah.
Just not ideal. But Shawshank, I think because it is a smaller story and the scale is so much more contained, we're dealing with the passage of a couple of decades, but it's rooted so clearly in the story between these two people that the rest of the world might not even exist.
Yes. I think it's the first time, too, that I've seen a platonic love story between two men, and I hadn't seen it. And there's plenty of movies that have done that, plenty of very popular movies, but I just hadn't seen them at that age. Sure. And to watch that unfold, and it have nothing to do with sex, and nothing to do with if they were getting anything but friendship and love from one another, and middle-aged men watching that happen. It was just, for me, it was beautiful to see two men be able to express themselves so openly on camera together without it being, like I said, without it being anything except friendship.
And again, it comes down to not only the casting, but the confidence. Like the Darabont knows that they'll sell it without overdoing it or underdoing it. The tone of the film is so, it's such an outlier because this is right at the moment of like the new independent American cinema. Tarantino's coming out and invigorating everything. And this is technically a crime drama in that it's set in a prison, and there's criminal activity, and there's, there are genuine threats. There's the whole sequence with, whatever you put in my mouth, I'm going to bite it off, which isn't, I was really struck. There's no gay panic joke to it at all. It's just like, it's calculated. It's a power move. It's one of the few, well, prison rape is the wrong term, right? For what's going on here, because it's all about like establishing dominance and all that stuff. And it's one of the few moments that I can remember in a film with a prison, and an American film specifically set in a prison, where it's really completely rational, right? There's nothing, there's no luridness to it.
Nothing salacious. No. Yes.
Yeah. Nobody is putting gay panic on top of it. There's no homophobic aspects to it.
No.
It's a surprisingly clear-eyed moment, especially for the period, because, Tango and Cash is 5 years ago, and that was just reprehensible with its I'm trying to, is it gender politics? I don't even know what to call it, but whatever it was bad.
It was horrible. I was just talking about that to my partner the other day. It was awful. Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that aspect. I only thought about really the sort of the love story between the two of them. But Darabont does handle the aspect of that. They're called the sisters in the movie, of those men that target Andy. There isn't any real using as those scenes to either titillate or push too far or make a commentary on prisons and what they're like for men. It's more about establishing power, and also more about establishing how close Andy was to not making it through those early years, which I think is a plot device, but it's done without going too far, which keeps the innocence, but it also establishes a certain amount of threat and danger for the audience to know that we're about to lose our central character.
I mean, it's weird to use the word tasteful, but it is like it's handled. Yeah. The whole film is sort of respectable in a way that people weren't prepared for.
Yeah.
And I do remember a couple of people saying that it was too squeaky clean, that it was too, it was too pleasant a vision of prison.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still seeing it through the memory of it's a story being told to you. And I think by having read narrated, by using that directly from the page, it makes it okay. Because I don't know that there's a version, like a Tarantinoized version of this story that you could tell that could work at the pace that they've used and at the tone that they've chosen. It really needs to be, we're being treated, the film is willing to treat us as adults.
Yes.
And offer that perspective on the story rather than kind of push your face into all the filth. And I don't know that you can do that and get the ending that King is going for, like the redemption and the heart.
You can't. I mean, it really is. It's a 2 hour and something 10-minute buildup to the moment when he's standing outside in the rain and he has finally been freed. And I don't think that the audience, I especially don't think that it would become this much of a beloved piece. I don't think that we could watch the horrific things that these characters, that the movie has alluded that they've gone through, or that we've sort of seen in these, milder versions of some scenes of aggression or sexual assault. Had the audience had to sit there slowly for 2 hours and some time, it doesn't pay off. You can't get the same thing. You're not invested in the characters the same way. I don't think you're not invested in the story in the same way. You might have, feelings for Andy and Red, but not even other of the supporting characters that we go into. And so it's not really about, I think that's what upsets me about people when they critique films, because sometimes you can have it a fairy tale-esque version of a prison. And it doesn't mean that that's exactly what they're trying to show. This is not a true story. This is a version of a story. It's already heightened to a very strange place with the music and the friendships. Mm. And so to criticize it for not being true to life is just a bit silly to me. It's not a documentary. It's a version of a story.
Well, and it's also a story about nothing happening, right? The whole point of the passage of time is that their incarceration continues. There are things that happen within that, but it's about the lack of event. So a version of this that has action sequences or a chase would just be
something would cheapen it.
It would be, and it would weirdly unbalance it too, because you just need to sink into the fact that you're watching stasis. And if you do that, then you have to be resting on actors who can carry it. You have to be able to tell the audience that it's okay that nothing is going to happen for an hour, that you're just going to watch these people exist. And again, like, this is a first feature. It's amazing. He knew how to do it.
Yeah. And the writing supports that as well. The writing is beautiful. The last 3 lines, I hope to make it across the border. I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. I mean, just to have a 60-year-old man say that and for it to draw tears and emotion out of me. It's not just the lines. It's obviously they're about to reunite, but it's just the writing is just as slow and steady and beautiful and earnest as the performances are. And I think that that's also what gives it that squeaky clean feeling. But it's something that I love.
Yeah. The one note that I've never really wanted from it is seeing them at the end.
I didn't want it either.
Yeah.
Nope, I didn't. I just wanted that shot of him on the bus looking out the window. He goes and he gets the compass, or even if it just pans up and it sees the water. There's the overhead shot of the water. You don't even have to see Andy on the boat, just maybe indicating that he made it to the Pacific to see that it was blue. But yeah, me too. Sorry, by that time I'm usually bawling hysterically. But yeah, I hope I don't like it either.
They don't make the movie if he doesn't get there. Like, that's if they don't find each other again, we have to believe that's where it's headed. And I think now you could get away with it. There's an entire film movement about denying us that last shot and just bringing up the title instead. The Christopher Nolan package, I think we call it. But there is a way to do it. And on the other hand, if you do that, maybe it doesn't linger with people. You miss the mass audience. You don't get people discovering it for the first time and having it assure them that everything's going to be okay, and then inviting them to watch it again. It's that little point in time where, like, nothing was guaranteed. There were no sure things. This was a Stephen King project that was considered risky because it wasn't a horror thing, and even after Stand By Me, and he just shoots a shot. Like, Darabont just made the movie he wanted to make, which even now feels like it escaped rather than got released. Well, unlikely, yeah.
Yes, yeah, I think so. I mean, now filmmakers are up against so much pressure, and I mean, we were just talking about the megaplexes. This is around the time when megaplexes were still thriving. Yep. So filmmakers like Darabont, especially with Stephen King and the success of Stand By Me, that filmmakers could get those chances, and especially with something that was this sort of earnest and not violent and, dare I say, sweet. It's not a Cronenberg film. I've been in 2. I've been in David and Brandon's films. It's not a Cronenberg film, and so I could see how. Even though you're right, I said impossible, but it's not impossible. Nowadays, to pull something like this off, no. When movie theaters are shuttering and it's streaming and you can't get anything made and it's only Marvel, I'm not sure it could be made even as a series.
And that kind of brings us to Ashgrove, because that's where smaller films have ended up, like where independent movies have ended up have been hyper concentrated and really, really intimate, kind of in the same way with, like, Ashgrove mostly takes place in a single location with the same people as we follow them. I mean, it's more like 2 days instead of 20 years, but
yes.
I remember when Jeremy told me what he had done, because he didn't even mention it before it happened. Like, we snuck off to the farm and shot a movie without a script.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of radical experiment you can use as a hook now, because it's no longer enough to just make that movie. You have to make it without a net.
Yes.
to get people to pay attention.
Completely. And find something new-ish as your hook, and find something that will afterwards hopefully help with, especially because it's an indie, hopefully help with word of mouth, just something that's unique and interesting. It's just not enough to go into the woods with your friends anymore and shoot something. I think when I saw Blair Witch for the first time, I thought, oh my God, that's amazing. But you can't do that anymore. You have to come up with 4,000 other ways to make people watch.
But in this case, I want to know everything. I think it's such a, well, your function, if I'm remembering this correctly, you're the only person who knew where it was going?
I'm the only person who did not.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, so
I'm the lead of the film, and I'm the only person who did not. Jeremy and Jonas, we, for, a year, because we had the luxury of doing so, met up in Zoom rooms for the first 6 months of the pandemic, and crafted this story together, crafted the characters, and a great deal of backstories and background information was helped us, really. It's the most amount of prep that I've ever had on someone, specifically with my central scene partner and my director. It was a beautiful, wonderful luxury that I don't think I'll ever get. I hope I do. We had the shape of a story. We had the shape of loosely based ideas, loosely based scripts and things that we were going to say to one another. But ideally, we were going to go in and sort of just shoot and see what happens. I felt I had an idea of what was going to happen, but Jeremy and Jonas decided at the very beginning that they were going to lead me to believe I knew how the film was going to end or what we were going to do, but they completely had lied to me.
Okay, I misunderstood that bit.
Yes. So in the middle half, we shot in we shot in order, and so we weren't jumping around and bouncing around. So I would get an indication that something was off until we reached the point where I thought the script was going left, but the script took a hard right. And when that took a hard right, I almost left set. And they were preparing for me to leave because it was a scene with Christine Horn. I knew she was in the film. I helped cast her in the film, write ideas down for her of where I wanted her character to go. But I had no idea she was going to be Australian and she was going to show up with two sort of blacked out navigators and trap me into the set and then come running at me. I did not know that was going to happen. And so from then the film it went off the rails for me, but it was amazing.
That's incredible. I almost feel like I shouldn't include this part in the episode because no one will understand what we're talking about.
They won't understand. And also our theatrical release is on Friday. And even if they are hearing it now, that you won't even be able to really attach what I'm saying to what you're about to see, because then it takes a bunch more turns.
Yeah, it's true. And, hopefully by that point in the movie, nobody's going to be thinking about this podcast if they're watching it.
No. And if they are, hopefully they will.
As long as they're not thinking, I'd really rather be watching the Shawshank Redemption right now.
It's true. I mean, if they are, I won't be mad at them because it's my favorite. So I'll be okay with that.
My thanks to Amanda Brugel, who stars opposite Jonas Chernick, Natalie Brown, Christine Horn, Sujith Verghese, and Sean Doyle in Ashgrove, in theaters and on digital across Canada this Friday, December 2nd. Thanks also to Jeremy Lalonde. He knows what he did. Amanda's no longer on Twitter, and I don't really blame her, but you can find her on Instagram at Amanda Brugel, all one word, and you can find The Shawshank Redemption on 4K, Blu-ray, and DVD from Warner Home Entertainment, and streaming on Netflix, Crave, and Stars on Amazon in Canada, and on HBO Max, DirecTV, Fubo, and AMC Plus on the Roku channel in the US. It's also available to rent or buy on various VOD platforms. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next week.